Hello and welcome to a new episode of That Fertile Feeling, the podcast. My name is Françoise and I'm here today with Annette Green, who is an abdominal therapist just like myself. And I actually just took a masterclass with Annette on endometriosis. So she's been practicing in this field. I haven't checked with her, but I imagine over a decade now.
It's getting close to that, yeah.
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 Um, she's treated a lot of clients with endometriosis. So I thought, given that this is a podcast for women who are having trouble conceiving, and I know that so many of you struggle with endometriosis, that it would be really great to talk to her, talk about what endometriosis is, but especially what it is that you can do yourself other than getting on birth control or getting your uterus taken out to find relief and maybe even reverse your condition. So welcome, Annette, on the show. I gave you a little bit of an introduction, but maybe you can tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do.
Thank you very much. I always call myself a holistic practitioner because I feel like it kind of covers all the different things that I do. But a big part of my work is the abdominal therapy, which I learned about 8 years ago. But even before that, I was doing reflexology for many years. And because of my own personal story of having issues trying to conceive, when I did train in reflexology and in massage, I really wanted to help women and couples who were in a similar situation to what I had been in. Today, I have two daughters, and I'm very grateful that they came
Mm.
to join our family. And I integrate other kinds of therapies into my work, but I feel like the abdominal therapy is very central to most of the work that I do with my clients, especially around endometriosis.
And I've done a couple of episodes before on abdominal therapy, but maybe for the listeners who haven't heard any of those, can you explain a little bit about what abdominal therapy is?
Mm-hmm. So the lineage that I'm part of comes through Rosita Alvigo, who went to live in Belize many years ago and met Donna Panti, who was a very famous shaman there. And she managed to bring in information and knowledge that she had from previous trainings, and she kept learning and investigating and researching, along with a lot of the information that was shared by Donna Panti and other traditional healers and midwives in the area. And that body of work has been passed down, and I trained in it quite a while ago. And the basis is we're trying to bring the body back to balance.
Mm.
And one of the ways we do that is by improving the blood flow in the body, because there's so many things which are being transported around our body via the bloodstream, be it oxygen and hormones and nutrients, as well as waste products which need to leave our body. And through massage on our bellies and on our back and other gentle manipulations that we do, we can improve that blood flow and also energy flow and lymph flow um, in our entire body, because the belly and the abdomen really is the center of our body, and everything has to pass through
Mm.
there on its way from the heart and back to the heart. So working on the belly is really powerful work and deep work also. And also coming to this work with an understanding that we hold so much in our bellies, whether that's tension because of things that we're dealing with in our life, or memories and experiences that we've had. And when you think about all the different expressions we have around our stomach and our belly, and where do we often feel stress and tension, sometimes the first place is in our bellies,
Mm.
when we're leading up to a big event, or when something stressful has happened, we feel that tension. So yeah, so it is massage, but then in a way it's so much more than just massage, because when we touch the belly, we can affect somebody's health on many levels, not just physically, but also allowing them to release things emotionally and supporting them even spiritually.
Mm. Yeah, I very much recognize that even from the treatments I got myself during our training. Did you already come across abdominal therapy when you were trying to conceive yourself, or is that something that you found later?
No, I didn't. I did try a lot of different things. I kind of realized pretty early on that I wanted to explore the holistic side of therapies to help me get pregnant, much more than the more conventional medical treatments which are available. And At the time in Israel, which is where I live, abdominal therapy hadn't quite made it here.
Mm,
It only came a few years afterwards. So I always kind of think to myself, oh, what would have happened if I'd found out about this earlier? I don't
mm,
know. Um, so no, it wasn't part of my journey. The reflexology was part of my journey, and I went on to do more detailed studying about how reflexology can affect fertility.
mm-hmm,
And that's something that I combine with the abdominal therapy. But yeah, basically I wanted to help. I came to the abdominal therapy world because I had heard about it in the context of improving fertility.
mm,
And so I wanted to integrate that with the reflexology for fertility that I was doing.
mm-hmm,
And only after I started practicing the abdominal therapy, other people started to hear about how it could be useful for endometriosis,
mm-hmm,
and those kind of clients started coming to me. And then I started to learn a lot more about endometriosis so that I could help my clients more.
mm. Yeah, that's a nice bridge to what we're going to discuss today. So, endometriosis, can you explain a little bit about what it is and how it affects women?
Mm-hmm. So there's a very wide range of symptoms that somebody with endometriosis might suffer from or experience. And that can be things like period pain, but the pain that feels like period pain, it may not just be when she's bleeding. It could be that she experiences it before. It could be that she has pain around ovulation.
Mm,
And it could be that she's in a lot of pain for most of the cycle, irregardless to when she's actually bleeding. Sometimes she can experience back pain, fatigue. A lot of women with endometriosis have digestive issues. A lot of them feel like their stomach literally expands throughout the day through bloating. Um, Fertility can be one of the issues that they experience, but not everybody with endometriosis has fertility issues. Um, what else? What else? I think that the main thing is really pain,
mm-hmm,
especially pelvic pain, but not only pelvic pain. Yeah. And so that's basically what a woman might experience. And there
mm-hmm,
are some women who really don't have a lot of those symptoms, and they discover that they have endometriosis when they're going through the journey of trying to get pregnant. But basically, what happens is, every month the uterine lining, it releases, and that's the blood that comes out during a woman's menstrual cycle, during her period. And then that uterine lining, the endometrium, starts to rebuild as the body prepares for another potential pregnancy. And what happens in the case of endometriosis is those cells, or cells which are very similar to the endometrium, to the uterine lining, are found outside of the uterus. And this is problematic because the uterine lining, those cells, respond to the changing hormones in the menstrual cycle.
mm,
So when hormones are being released, which is telling the uterine lining to build itself up
mm-hmm,
in anticipation of a potential pregnancy, then those endometriosis cells are also going to be responding to that,
mm,
to those hormones, even though they're outside of the uterus. And then when the hormones change at the beginning of a woman's period, there's a drop in progesterone, and that basically signals that the woman isn't pregnant and that the uterine lining should be released again. Then those endometriosis cells, which are outside of the uterus, they also start to bleed.
mm,
But the problem is the blood doesn't have anywhere to go. It's stuck inside the body somewhere. And
mm-hmm,
whenever we have, blood which can't be released, it causes, scar tissue or adhesions because it stays there. The body
mm-hmm,
can't cope with getting rid of it. And over time, it can just get worse and worse, which is what a lot of women find is what happens, that they start off with a certain range of symptoms and level of pain, and over time, it can get worse.
mm-hmm,
And that endometriosis tissue is responding especially to estrogen. So
mm-hmm,
whenever the estrogen levels are rising, that's when those endometriosis tissues are also responding and growing more and more. And so we kind of have to get into this loop of bleeding, more scar tissue, adhesions, and then it essentially is like an inflammation inside the body.
mm-hmm,
And then over time, it gets worse and worse. And the immune system can't cope with it. And So then we might see also issues with the immune system not functioning, people feeling sick all the time. The level of fatigue also that a lot of women with endometriosis talk about.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is connected with that inflammation response in the
Hmm.
body, that the body feels like it's always on attack.
Yeah.
And so it has to kind of like bring in the big guns to put out the fire, so to
Yeah.
speak. And that takes a lot of internal energy. And so when we're using up a lot of our internal resources,
Mm.
then we feel tired because we just don't have the energy to be doing other things.
I can totally sort of even by almost feel on what you're saying, like your body is at work. It's making overtime to fight that its own responses to those hormones. But I do remember you saying that the immune system can also play a role in suppressing endometriosis. Is that right?
Yeah, so what they found is that sometimes when women have had abdominal surgery for a different reason, nothing related to endometriosis, they weren't aware that they had endometriosis.
Mm.
The surgeons have seen that there is endometriosis tissue, meaning
Mm.
that these women have endometriosis, but they didn't know because they didn't have symptoms of it. So that begs the question of if it was there and I don't have symptoms, what's going on? And a book that I was reading recently had this idea that endometriosis is not always active. So it could be that there is a presence of these cells, but they're not causing any kind of issue. They're not responding to the estrogen
Hmm.
that's being released during the menstrual cycle. And as a result, they're not causing pain or bloating or any kind of discomfort.
Mm.
So, and actually, what's interesting is some of my experience with my clients is that we have a big reduction in symptoms, meaning
Hmm.
a lot less pain, a lot less fatigue, and even in some cases, the ability to get pregnant naturally after going through many medicated cycles previously and not being able to get pregnant.
Mm.
And some of them have gone for ultrasounds with an endometriosis specialist,
Hmm.
both, with a gap of like 6 months. They went just before they started working with me, and then after 6 months. And during that time, they've had a huge reduction in their symptoms.
Hmm.
But on the ultrasound, they don't see a big difference, which is really interesting. When people started to tell me that, I was trying to like figure out what's going on. And what I think basically is that the immune system is strengthened,
Hmm.
and the immune system can cope with the presence of this tissue without getting out of balance,
Hmm.
and it doesn't cause problems. It's
Mm.
not it's not active essentially. And so this book that I was reading asked the question is endometriosis a noun or a verb? Which was the first time that I had been introduced to this concept and this question.
Hmm.
And I really resonated with it because I have seen how different people react differently over time with endometriosis. And sometimes people have a huge improvement in their symptoms. And
Hmm.
then suddenly, so it seems like it's not active. There
Hmm.
is some kind of regression. And then suddenly something happens. Often it's something emotional.
Hmm.
They are put under a great deal of stress. Something very emotionally distressing happens in the family, etc.
Hmm.
And then suddenly they have a huge flare up of symptoms. And so
Mm.
it's kind of like the body gets out of balance
Yeah.
and it responds in that way. And so then I feel like, yes, they are actively the endometriosis is active in that particular moment.
Hmm.
But usually we can kind of remind the body that it can go back to balance,
Hmm.
and usually, especially if they've already had that experience of having an improvement in symptoms, it's not a lot of work to help them back to balance again.
Mm.
Yeah, so there's a wide range of experience amongst women who have endometriosis.
Hmm.
And I guess I'll just bring in the fertility issue around it,
Mm.
in that endometriosis is thought to be one of the main reasons why couples may have issues conceiving. But on the other hand, I have a lot of clients with endometriosis who have 3, 4, or more children and really
Mm.
didn't have any issue conceiving. So that's what I like to remind people when I meet them, especially I often meet people who have fertility issues and endometriosis. And I just like to remind them that it's not black and white, that if you have endometriosis, you're going to have problems conceiving. And that
Mm.
once we manage to reduce the symptoms and get them feeling better overall, then oftentimes the pregnancy will follow after that.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a really empowering message, both that endometriosis being a verb and not a noun. I also remember you sharing some research that showed, I think it was like in only 29% of cases, endometriosis really got worse over time, and in other like 40% it stagnated, and you would also see a reversal of symptoms in 30%,
Yeah,
something
yeah, there
along those
were. I
lines.
don't remember the numbers exactly, but yes, it was something like that. That there was a number of people who don't who did see an improvement in symptoms, and I'm not sure exactly in this study what these people were doing
Mm,
for that to happen. So that's also a question to ask.
yeah.
But one of the reasons why I shared that information was I think that part of our role
Hmm.
and the work that we do with people with endometriosis is to give them a little bit of hope and or even a lot of hope and to help them understand that it's not black and white. It doesn't mean, oh, you have endometriosis, that means you're going to suffer for the rest of your life.
Mm,
Not at all. The opposite. I think it's an opportunity to take stock and see what's working in your life, what's not working in your life. What are the things that you have to do to take better care of yourself? And, as different cultures have different approaches to this, but I think in general, we as women are often educated to give to other people.
hmm.
And sometimes it's harder for us to look after ourselves. And I do remember once one of my clients saying to me that she kind of resented in a way that she had to do so much self-care to look
Hmm.
after herself. She had to watch what she was eating because nutrition can be a big part of endometriosis and reducing the symptoms. And
Mm,
she was coming to me, and I had taught her to do your abdominal massage, a short routine of massage that she could do on her own abdomen to also improve the symptoms and feel better
hmm.
and improve the blood flow in between appointments. We had talked about doing a regular exercise and various things. And also a lot with her was a lot of like emotional management of stress in her life. And so she was like, she felt a bit resentful that she had to do all of that work. And it's true, like there are some people in life who just seem to be able to kind of coast along and they don't have to take
Hmm.
as much interest and activity related to their health. And there's other people who do have to do more. It's just, like some people have to work harder at school to get higher grades, and some people seem to just skate along and get the good grades
Mm,
without it. So,
yeah. Yeah, I did a really interesting interview earlier this week with a hormone specialist that was Manuela Fortunato. So she's an Italian. And what it all came down to in her story, and I think that was a really beautiful way of putting it, it's about finding nourishment again. So
mm,
I can totally see your client sort of resenting having to invest in nourishment because that's also a question I asked Manuela, like, why is it that we've forgotten how to have fun? Having fun is such an important thing to rebalance your nervous system, to find back that place of ease within yourself. And the same with eating, make eating fun again. Find foods that are really nourishing and that make you feel better, not like in the short moment that you sit on the couch with a bag of chips, but really where you feel like, oh, this is making me feel so much more alive and vibrant. So yeah, I think those are both two sides of the same coin. You can see it as oh, I have to change something, but it's also about finding something back in life that we've come to lose for some reason.
yeah, and like everything in life, we can choose how we think about things. And on the one hand, we can see it as a chore,
Mm,
or we can also say, um, I'm lucky that I get to do this, or that this is something which helps me, and so I'm willing to invest that time because I get it back afterwards. I have the energy to go and do the things that I want to do.
mm,
And with endometriosis especially, I've met quite a number of people who their work life has been severely impacted
mm,
by endometriosis, in addition to their private life. People who had to stop working in particular professions, or they had to drastically reduce the number of hours that they could work just because they didn't have the energy, and they were dealing with a lot of pain. And so I kind of feel like if we want to be able to do all of those things, be active in our family life and also in our work life,
mhm.
sometimes we have to invest the time in looking after ourselves so that we can do those things.
Yeah. So really,
And to look
I
at it
find it.
and
Oh,
to look at
sorry.
it as an investment. Sorry, and to look at it as an investment rather than a chore.
Yeah, yeah. Um, going back to endometriosis, you mentioned so these cells are just appearing in the body. Do we know what causes endometriosis? Why are these cells suddenly moving outside of the
So
uterine lining and also appearing in other places?
yeah, so there's a lot of theories about what causes endometriosis, and we don't really have a decisive answer. Some of the theories, I mean, the original theory was that those cells really did come from the uterus,
Mm,
and they left they went out of the uterus via the fallopian tubes. And, a lot of people don't really give that theory a lot of basis today. Although I do think that it has an element of truth, just because when I think about yoga, I've been practicing yoga for many years.
mm,
And one of the things that they say to women when they're bleeding is
mm,
not to do the inversion poses, etc. And I think that there is a reason. Part of it is, of course, that the natural flow of blood is in the opposite direction, so we don't want to work against nature.
mm,
Um, but possibly some of those poses might be, squeezing the uterus in a certain way, and possibly some of the blood would go out through the fallopian tube. But on the other hand, they've found the presence of endometriosis cells in, very young babies who died, and they did an autopsy and they've seen it. So then
mm,
it must have been present from in utero.
mm,
Um, and then there's some people who think that it might be connected to chemical exposure. Today, so many of us are exposed to chemicals, not
mm,
just, in a place of work, if you might work with dangerous chemicals or something, but just in our day to day, a lot of the personal care products that people are using have a lot of hormones. And the issue is that sometimes they can mimic estrogen
mm,
and the effect of estrogen on our body. And of course, endometriosis and those cells respond to estrogen.
mm,
Um, and then there does seem to be a higher amount of sexual trauma amongst people who have endometriosis. So there is a theory that it could be connected with that.
mm,
Um, so I have met people who really wanted to understand and know for sure what had caused endometriosis for them. And unfortunately, I never really felt like they got an answer.
mm,
And I think sometimes I'm just thinking about one client in particular. She was just spending a lot of time and energy trying to investigate what had caused it. And I do understand why you want to understand, what caused a particular issue that you're dealing with. But I like to help people focus more on making the changes that they can
mm,
to feel better in the here and now, because we can't go back and change whatever it was. And most of those things are things we don't have control over.
yeah,
And also, I didn't mention it, but there does seem to be some kind of genetic condition. So if your mother had endometriosis, then you may be more likely to have endometriosis.
mm,
And there's a big lack of awareness. So it could be that, our mother's generation, they wouldn't have been diagnosed necessarily, whereas the next generation might have been. And I do treat, at the moment, I work with three sisters who two have been diagnosed with endometriosis, and the third one, they suspect that that's what she has.
mm.
So I do see a connection there. Um, and, we can't change our genetics, but there's a lot of things that we can do to still improve our health and the way that it manifests
Mm.
and the way that endometriosis manifests in our life.
And you said there's not necessarily a one-on-one connection between endometriosis and having fertility challenges. Do we know how endometriosis affects fertility? Or is that also
Okay.
sort of more unclear?
Well, there are some theories.
Hmm.
Um, there can be endometriosis when it's outside of the uterus. It often tends to be close to the uterus. So a lot of the lesions will be on the outside of the uterus, on the fallopian tubes, on the ovaries, on the ligaments which are holding the uterus in place in the pelvis. It can be further afield. They have found that the endometriosis tissue in other places, but it tends to be around that area. And so if you have endometriosis on the ovaries, then it could affect the ovarian function,
Mm,
meaning it's harder for ovulation to occur. Or possibly there's a lot of scar tissue there. And even though when we look at these pictures of the female reproductive system, it all looks kind of static.
mhm,
In actual fact, there's a lot of movement going on there throughout the month. So the fallopian tubes aren't connected to the ovary.
mhm,
When we look at the pictures, often they are, but in real life, they're not. But the body tells the fallopian tube when ovulation is imminent. And so the fimbriae, the fingers at the end of the fallopian tube, come and position themselves over the ovary so that they can catch the egg the moment that it's released, and then wafted into the fallopian tube so that if there's sperm waiting for fertilization can occur. So basically, those fallopian tubes need to move in order to get it in position to catch the egg. And if there's a lot of scar tissue, adhesions, and there is a lack of movement, then it could be that the egg isn't going into the fallopian tube, for example. That's one issue. The ovarian function has been affected. It's very common. We didn't really touch on it, but there's kind of like a sister condition called adenomyosis, which is when you have this endometrium-like tissue, endometriosis-like tissue, but it burrows into the uterine wall. And that causes issues. And so it could be that the woman does conceive, but when that little tiny embryo comes into the uterus and it needs to implant, there's a problem with implantation because of the adenomyosis. So yeah, there's a lot of things that they do. I think they do have a higher rate of miscarriage, even if conception has occurred. In general, the whole area of the pelvis, there seems to be more stagnation. And so a lot of the things that just happen naturally when pregnancy occurs might be affected. So that might be one of the reasons.
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask you about adenomyosis as well, if that's a similar condition, or are there really big differences, or should we look at both of these conditions in the same way?
So it's very common for somebody to be diagnosed with both. So they often seem to go together. Adenomyosis, as I said, it's more about inside the uterine wall, and it can be very painful. And that can be one of the reasons why periods can be very painful, or there can be pelvic pain throughout the month. It's a little bit harder to treat in terms of surgery, okay, because of one of the things that endometriosis specialists offer people when they're diagnosed with endometriosis, not always, but depending on what their case is surgery, but it's much more difficult. There isn't a surgery for adenomyosis. And often they might experience very heavy bleeding as another additional symptom. But in general, they're very similar symptoms.
And would you treat them the same way as well?
Yes, definitely treat them the same way. I feel like abdominal therapy has a lot to offer anybody diagnosed with adenomyosis, because we're doing the same thing. We're trying to bring the body back to balance. We're trying to improve the blood flows throughout the body, the energy and the lymph flowing throughout the body. And, I do really believe that the body, when it is given the things that it needs, whether it's the nutrients that it needs and rest and, a healthy environment and movement and all those kinds of things, our body is programmed to know what to do. Keep breathing, and our digestive system works, and everything's working. It's only when we really notice it really when something goes wrong. And so I have a lot of respect for that kind of like innate wisdom in the body. And so I feel like with holistic therapies in general, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to just sometimes we got out of balance because of stress in our life, because of physical things that happened or whatever it is. And we just give the body little nudges all the time to get back into balance. And yeah, so I feel like that's really what our work is. And just all of that together strengthens the immune system. And then if there is tissue that is, not in the right place or not doing what it should do, then the body should be able to deal with it. Because that's what's happening in a lot of these cases of women with endometriosis, that they don't have symptoms.
Yeah.
The body knows how to cope with that tissue
Yeah.
as it should. And so we need to just strengthen our bodies and bring it back to balance so it can happen.
Yeah. And again, I find that such an empowering message. Your body isn't broken, it's out of balance. And you can help it find
Yes.
its way back to balance. And you can find that
Yes.
yourself. Like, you don't necessarily need to put all of the authority and you don't have to give that power to a doctor or to an expert. You can work with your
Yes.
own tools. Yeah.
So many people who are experiencing infertility, and I know that I went through this feeling as well. There is this feeling of being broken because, aren't I just meant to get pregnant naturally? And when you look around, it looks like everybody is doing that so easily, although we don't always know what's going on behind closed doors. So yeah, there can be that feeling of feeling broken. And I just believe that everybody has their different challenges in life, and what cards we've been dealt with, we need to deal with them basically, and find the best way to deal with them.
Yeah. And so what do you do when someone comes to you with endometriosis? What are some of the things you look at or that you advise them with?
So, the first time I meet somebody, a big part of my work is gaining their trust, explaining about what I do. Because sometimes or often by the time I meet somebody, they've been dealing with pain for quite a time, or they've been dealing with the fertility journey for an issue for a long time. And they may have seen many doctors until they finally got a diagnosis for endometriosis. The average is like 10 or 11 years for a
Mm,
woman to be diagnosed with endometriosis. And during that time, she's been experiencing symptoms, and she might have been going from doctor to doctor, and nobody's kind of put all of the symptoms together to understand that's what she is experiencing. So a lot of it is, working on building trust and helping her feel like a little bit of optimism that something can change. And I use the tools that I've learned through abdominal therapy, the abdominal therapy massage, and then I'll teach them to use castor oil packs. And a little bit later on, I don't introduce it right at the beginning. I might be teaching them also about perineum steaming, depending if they're open to that idea. But a lot of work on finding ways for them to find a little bit more calm in their life.
mhm,
If they're super busy, when can they carve out a little bit of time for themselves? My approach is very gradual, okay, because my experience personally as a client and things that I've seen around me is that sometimes we get a diagnosis or we're dealing with a particular issue and we suddenly just want to change everything.
mhm,
We throw out all the flour in our house and all the sugar, we cut out dairy and we turn vegan and all these different things. And it's hard to cope with big changes
mhm,
over a length of time. So I like to make gradual changes and just help. Of course, I teach my clients to do the abdominal massage at home for themselves.
mhm,
And a lot of them find that really empowering.
mhm,
That, as you say, it's not just an expert or a doctor who does the work, that they have a tool for themselves
mhm,
to improve their health, which can be so empowering because sometimes you can just feel like you don't know what to do. There's so much information out there today,
mm,
especially in the world of endometriosis. I've seen just in the time that I've been working with these clients, suddenly there's so many more people who are working and trying to help people like this. But then it can be confusing. What do I do?
mhm.
And there's conflicting advice. So yeah, so I use those tools also to help women to connect to their internal wisdom so that they can make the choices that are the best for them.
Mm.
Um, and everybody finds, what works for them.
Yeah. So you mentioned, okay, you give them the treatment, the abdominal massage, because that supports,
Mhm.
as we just discussed, it supports the entire flow of blood, of oxygen. It helps eliminate waste products better. And women could do that themselves with their own abdominal massage as well. And then the
Mhm.
castor oil packs, I've done an episode on them before, but those are used also for pain management, I imagine.
Well, the castor oil is good for when we have scar tissue
Mm-hmm.
or adhesions. So in the case of endometriosis, often we have that present. And castor oil packs, in addition to like improving the blood flow and kind of getting the immune system, strengthening the immune system, it also has a calming effect.
Mm-hmm.
So it can have like a dual effect, working on the physical issues of helping things move a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
and also helping to calm down because it affects the parasympathetic nervous system, um, which is really important, I think, for everybody in this day
Mm-hmm.
and age. Um, and yeah, I mean, if somebody's doing cast oil packs a few times a week, it can give them the opportunity to just rest for half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And, I encourage people to journal or put on some nice music, take that time for yourself. Sometimes we feel selfish if we take time for ourselves to look after ourselves and do self-care practices. But we need to do that. We can't help other people if we don't first help ourselves.
Mm. Uh,
Yeah. So castor oil is definitely something which is helpful. And also herbs can be very useful. Um,
yeah, because you mentioned the perineal steams. Those are steams where you use herbs, right? That you.
yeah, you use herbs and they can be collected near to where you live if you have access to fresh herbs, or you can use dry herbs. And I feel like it's a practice there's a lot more renewed interest and knowledge about using these steams, but really it's more of an ancient traditional practice. But it's nice that people are now embracing it. And it's something that you can do at home
Mhm.
and you don't need a lot of equipment and it's pretty easy to do.
And how do you feel? Does it bring relief, or how does it help with endometriosis? Or what are
So
some of them? Yeah.
yeah, so the perineal steams, one of the things that it does, it's kind of like helping move. When there's more warmth,
Hmm.
in general, that also means there's more movement. We think of something cold, it's normally like very stiff and it doesn't have a lot of movement. So the steam is encouraging blood flow
Hmm.
and flow in general in the whole area of the pelvis and softening the tissue that's there.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I didn't mention it before, but it is a common symptom also for women with endometriosis is painful sex.
Mm.
And then there's a kind of loop that happens there that if sex is painful, then when you're about to do it again, you start to tense up because you're kind of anticipating the pain.
Mm.
And so you get into this loop where um, just the thought of it can be painful or can make you tense up, and then it's more likely to be painful. And steaming is a way of like relaxing and opening things up. And again, it can be a good reason to just sit for 20 minutes
Mm.
and do a meditation or just think whatever thoughts come into your head and then let them float away. Um, and take time for yourself in addition to the therapeutic benefits of it. And of course, there are particular herbs which, they also add benefit to the steaming.
Mm. Can you explain how someone could do a perineal steam if they're not familiar with this technique?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. Um, you need to get about a handful of herbs if you have available fresh herbs. And there can be things that you would make tea out of. That's the easiest way to make sure that you're using safe
Mm.
plants, whether it's lavender, I'm trying to think what's available in different areas, chamomile.
Chamomile. Mm.
Yes, I don't know if I would put mint in, but you could experiment with a couple of, leaves of mint. Rosemary is fantastic. I've got a huge rosemary bush out the front of my house. I often use that. Um, so yeah, look at what you have locally available, plants that you would make tea, so then you know that they're safe to use, and even though you're not taking them internally now. Um, and then if you're using dry herbs, you would take about a cup of dry herbs, and you just place that in like a medium-sized pot with water, bring it to the boil, and let it boil for about 10 minutes with the lid on. And then when it's come to the boil, turn the gas off with the electricity and just let it steep there for a few more minutes. And then we don't need the herbs anymore. So you can take them out if you want. And then there's different ways of doing it. But basically, we want to be sitting over the steam
Mhm.
coming from this the water that we've prepared with the herbs. So I find the easiest way is to have a stainless steel bowl, which would fit in your toilet.
Mhm.
Okay, so you would like lift up the toilet seat and put it in, and just to pour the water from the hot water
Mhm.
into that pot, keeping the herbs out because afterwards, if possible, and
Mhm.
then just to sit on the toilet then you put the seat down and then sit on the toilet like you normally would.
Yeah.
And so then the steam is going to come up, and you can wrap your legs with a big blanket or a big towel to keep the steam in. And if it's too hot, it's very easy just to stand up and
Mm.
let the steam come out for a minute or two and then try it again because we don't want
Mm.
it to be too hot. It's meant to be something pleasant.
Mm.
And talking about you know, steam and getting movement going. Okay, so we don't want it to be too hot. Um, and then to sit there for about 20 minutes.
Mm.
And there are some people who have specially made steaming chairs which is basically just a it's often like a wooden box with a hole in it. So you would place the bowl with the water or the pot underneath, and then you could sit on top.
Yeah.
And I found a really easy solution. It's also to buy like a camping toilet chair, which basically looks just like a little padded toilet seat, but it's on legs that fold.
Mm.
So apparently people take them with them when they're going camping.
Oh,
And so that can also work great
yeah.
because then, some people don't like to do it in the toilet.
Oh,
So then you could just place that camping toilet chair wherever it's comfortable, private
mm,
area in your house, put the bowl underneath, and then just wrap the lower part of your body with a big towel or blanket to keep the steam in. So there's lots of easy ways to do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I'm a big fan. I've started doing it a couple of years ago, and it's really, I've turned it into a meditation moment for myself. I clean out my entire
Mhm.
bathroom. I put the candles, I light candles, put on some flowers, and so I use your toilet method myself. And now it's become such a part of my meditation that I actually don't want to buy a steaming chair because I feel like, no, I've got my ritual down. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I first learned about it, I had never done one for myself. So I did it for myself. I was like, oh, okay, that's actually quite pleasant because I feel like I don't want to recommend things to people that I haven't tried myself.
Mm,
Or that I wouldn't be willing to try. And just, when you have the experience of doing something, it's so much easier to explain it to somebody else. So that's what I did. And at first I hesitated to tell my clients about this practice because I wasn't sure how they would react to it. But after I've seen people, a couple of times and I suggested to them, most of them are very open to trying it at least once. And some people connect with it, and it really, as you say, it becomes part of their practice
mm,
because it does feel pleasant. And also, when you start to see the results of it, then you want to do it more.
mm. Well, thank you, Annette, for a beautiful conversation, for sharing all of your knowledge on endometriosis, on abdominal therapy, perineal steams. Final question for you is what your general message would be for anyone who's dealing with fertility issues and or pregnancy loss? Oh, it's actually two final questions because another thing I wanted to ask you is because stress is such an important thing or factor in endometriosis. What do you suggest women do when their fertility challenges have become a huge source of stress for them?
Um, well, there's a lot of different things that people can do. I find sometimes a lot of the secrecy around having challenges getting pregnant can contribute to some of the stress, meaning they're doing a lot of things and they're having treatments, but they haven't told anybody. So then they have to lie about things, why they can't go to places, etc. And so I try to help them find people in their lives that they could share their journey with so that they have more people to share their experiences with because human beings, we're social people, social beings, and for many people keeping something a secret is actually takes out more energy than having to cope with how people might potentially react. Sometimes
Mm,
there's this fear, what are people going to say, what are they going to think about me, and all these kind of things. But certainly where I live, where the birth rate is very high, people after people kind of, people aren't stupid. And certainly where I live, there is this expectation that almost everybody here has kids. I know it's different in Europe.
mm,
Um, and so people kind of figure it out on their own. It's not like people don't understand or don't
mm,
know that a couple might be having issues. So there's that just basically finding support in their life, what things can help them feel better while they're going through the process. Because sometimes it can be a little bit like somebody who's trying to lose weight and they're like, I'll be happy when I lose weight. But what about all this time when I'm trying to lose weight? And it's the same thing with trying to get pregnant. You don't have to wait till you become a parent to be happy or till you become pregnant to be happy. What about trying to be happy now while you're going through the process?
mm,
Because we don't know when it's going to happen and it could take a bit of time. We do hope that it will happen. And
mm,
for the vast majority of people, it does eventually.
mm,
Um, but what about finding the things that bring you joy now and not waiting till you finally get to that place? An interesting thing is that sometimes somebody can want to have children for a long time, and then when they finally do, they realize it's actually quite challenging being a
Mm,
parent.
mm,
And it's not all roses and sunshine and laughing and tickling with
mm,
your kids. And so I think that if we find during our journey, if we find the things that bring us joy and we find the ways to cope with things,
mhm,
when we get to that place where we do have children, with Hashem, with God's help, then we might actually be better able to cope with the challenges that come later on. So yeah, that's one of the messages that I like to share with people. And
mm,
I love it when I get those messages that people are pregnant,
mm,
that they've given birth, and then I see them afterwards. I love it. And then I kind of chuckle a little bit internally when they start to complain about some of the things that they have to
mm.
deal with now. I'm happy for them that
Yeah,
those are their challenges now.
yeah. Has that been your own journey as well? You mentioned at the start that it took you a while to get pregnant. Were you able to find that place of joy even in that journey?
Yes, there are definitely ups and downs. And as I said, I live in a society where um, having children is very important. And, there's a lot of societal pressure
Mm,
to get pregnant and to have kids. Um, and another thing that comes up often with somebody who already has one child is when they want to get pregnant again, there's a lot of concern that the gap won't be too big.
mm,
And so what actually happened with me was um, I got pregnant maybe about 2 years after we officially started trying.
mm,
I was making all these changes, and then I actually have a 10-year gap between my two daughters.
mm,
In the middle of that, though, so many things happened. First of all, after my eldest daughter was born, things weren't happening again for us getting pregnant. And so at a certain point, we decided to become a foster family.
mhm,
And so we had three foster children that were siblings, which brought like a lot of joy to our life because we kind of just decided we wanted to just have more children in our
mm,
life. And so, okay, if they're not our children, so be it. And then I had another pregnancy also, which ended in the second trimester,
mm,
which was quite traumatic. And then my second daughter came along as a little bit of a surprise. I was kind of at that point where I was like, if it happens, great. And I'll do some things here and there to help it along. But I was kind of just at that point of if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And I kind of really surrendered at that point.
mhm,
But she had a very, very strong personality, and
mhm.
she knew she was coming, and so she found her way to us. Um, yeah, so I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, did you find joy? You found maybe a different way of being a mother.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it wasn't always easy, I'll be
Mhm,
honest with you. Fostering children is not an easy experience, but we had we had a lot of fun with the kids,
mhm,
and they did eventually go and were adopted by different families, but they stayed in contact, and we're in contact with them as well. And I feel just grateful for my two daughters. And another thing that I could often share with my clients when they do have that stress around what if I want to get pregnant as quickly as possible because I want my kids to be friends and I want them to have a good relationship. And if there's 4 years between them, then that's not going to
mm,
happen. And I just share that I have a 10-year gap, 10 and a half years actually.
mm,
And my daughters are so close. They get along so well in
mm,
spite of the big age gap. And there've been benefits to that, to be honest.
mhm.
Because of that age gap, my older daughter could help out so much more and babysit and a lot of things that she couldn't have done if she'd only been 2 or 3 years older,
Yeah,
my youngest. So always, we can find the silver lining and the benefits.
it can be painful and there can be silver linings, and both things can be
Yes,
true at the same time. Yeah,
yes, for sure. I can't tell you that it was easy going through
yeah,
all of the experience. It wasn't, but I learned so many things. And now, because I work in this field, I'm very grateful for some of those experiences that I had because I feel like I can share with my clients from a very genuine place
hmm,
of having experienced certain things. And it's not that my experience is the experience and it will be necessarily correct for them,
mm,
but I do think that we learn from hearing other people's experiences.
yeah,
And, that's why you have this podcast and that's why people
Yeah.
listen to it because they want to hear what other people are going through. That's
Yeah.
one of the ways we learn. And it also gives us hope. Um, so yeah, so I am very grateful for the things that I experienced. And I don't believe that as a practitioner, I need to experience everything in order to help somebody.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the things that I have experienced myself, they do come into the work that I do.
Mm.
And I think that yeah, so I really am. I am grateful for those things now. Now,
Mm.
but time sometimes allows us to look back
Yeah. Yeah.
and see the silver lining. And
Yeah.
after I had this miscarriage, and it was like at the end of week 16, so it was like people already knew I was pregnant,
Mm.
etc. So I had to deal with not only the loss of the pregnancy myself, and especially after I'd been waiting a long time to get pregnant, but also I had to deal with other people's discomfort. And
Mm.
as we don't always know how to help people in this situation or what the right thing to say is. I think like understanding what women go through during miscarriage also. There's a whole set of trauma around people who experience miscarriages, which can also affect them trying to get pregnant later on.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's so much about the human experience and yeah, like learning to accept
Yeah.
what is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for a beautiful conversation, Annette. If people want to find out more about you and your work, where can they find you? And do you offer online consultations as well?
So I have a website which is Annette, ANNETTE.co.il. And it's in two languages, it's in Hebrew and in English. So you just navigate to the English page. And I have a lot of information there about endometriosis, about abdominal therapy, and other things that I do. I also teach fertility awareness, and some of the work that I do online. So you're welcome to have a look there and see if anything resonates with you.
Great. I'll put it in the show notes. Are you on any social media as well?
Yes, I am on Instagram and I'm trying to be more active there, although to be honest, it's almost all in Hebrew.
Mhm.
Uh, um, yeah,
What's your
basically.
handle?
It's underscore Annette underscore Green.
Okay, underscore Annette underscore Green. I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thanks so much, and thanks also to the listeners for tuning in this week. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram at thatfertilefeeling or email me at friendswas@thatfertilefeeling.com. I always love to hear from you and I always get back to you and hope to see you back in 2 weeks. Bye bye.